of the University of North Carolina, James Moeser. He'll be talking about how American schools teach the Qur'an. A book on that religious text is recommended reading for incoming UNC freshmen and transfer students. This is live coverage from the National Press Club on C-SPAN.
Duration of the news conference. Thirdly, there is a list of other speakers and events coming up at the club. I've passed some around, and there's some more out on the table. And if they're all gone, there's one on the board outside. And we hope you might want to come to some of those. And in addition, there is some material related to this afternoon's Newsmaker. And that Newsmaker, as you know, is the Chancellor of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, Dr. James Moeser. Chancellor Moeser, welcome. I'm very glad to have you here, especially since I heard you're also a Texan.
That's right.
And I also want to thank the person who helped arrange this afternoon's Newsmaker with Dr. Moeser, the Communications Director for UNC Chapel Hill, Mr. Mike McFarland. Mike, thank you very much. In the back. Well, over the last few days, there have been the usual news stories about the anxieties of students in beginning a school year, but most of them don't become national news stories. And as I imagine you all know, otherwise you probably wouldn't be here, at UNC Chapel Hill they had a rather different first of the year situation. As part of its summer reading program, the university asked all new students, freshmen and transfers, to read a book called Approaching the Quran, Early Revelations, by Michael A. Sells, a professor of religion at Haverford College. The students were then to have group discussions about the book August 19th, which they did, I understand. And UNC said this was part of a program to give students a new perspective on Islam, to make them think about it. Critics call the move politically correct, a violation of the separation of church and state, since Carolina is a state school, and the book itself a sanitized view of Islam, since it omitted certain things about jihad, killing infidels, and certain other things. And the North Carolina General Assembly panel voted to withdraw funding for such programs unless they address all religious viewpoints. A Christian group's lawsuit to halt the assignment was turned down by a federal court, and with that backdrop, UNC Chapel Hill began the school year. Well, after all this, evidently the Quran discussion groups went off rather routinely, and our Newsmaker this afternoon can give us more details about the overall situation, the decision to make the assignment, the group discussions, and what has happened since. After he speaks, Chancellor Moeser will take your questions, and please let him know your name and affiliation when you ask them. And when you do have a question, you'll give me a signal of some sort. I'll call on you in turn, as many of you as time permits. And finally, if you haven't already done so, as you leave, please add your name to the sign-in sheet outside. Thank you very much, Chancellor Moeser.
Thank you very much, Peter, for that introduction. I would also like to recognize someone, a special guest who's with me here from the university, Richard Cole, who is Dean of the School of Journalism and Mass Communication at UNC. Where is he? Right over here, Dean Cole. We are very proud of our School of Journalism and Mass Communication, and we're delighted to have Dean Cole with us. Email to James Moeser at unc.edu. Quote, Americans are not interested in foreign relations. Foreigners are, of course. Thanks for identifying UNC as an Islamic university. Email. Not everyone's views are worth hearing. Muslims prove every day that Islam is a religion of violence and terror. Email. Islam needs to be destroyed, not taught. Email. After reading this article from the Washington Post, I took you off of the list of colleges I'm considering. May you find a pack of anthrax and a pipe bomb in your mailbox. Thank you. Email. I would like to know who the atheist idiot is that suggested the teaching of the Koran in some college there in your state. You might as well teach the full course of anti-Americanism. Email. Congratulations on choosing to become the Berkeley of the East Coast. I hope your enrollment plummets in the face of this idiotic decision. Email. I've thought for a long time that Islam could not exist in harmony with anyone, but I was wrong. It'll fit in just fine with the People's Republic of Chapel Hill. And my all-time favorite, you are doing the work of Satan, and you will surely perish in the lake of fire. All of this because we asked students to read a book. Some of you know this story, but for those of you who do not, let me quickly lay out the sequence of events in this controversy. For the past 4 years, as part of an effort to enrich the intellectual climate at Chapel Hill, we have asked
We're having some technical problems, and we'll return to our live coverage as soon as the problems are corrected. And largest religion departments in any American public university. And in response to this clear threat to academic freedom, the Board of Governors of the 16-campus University of North Carolina system failed in an initial vote to endorse a resolution to support academic freedom. Last week, the Board of Governors Committee on Planning, Policies, and Programs unanimously approved a new motion reaffirming academic freedom. Throughout it all, the letters, emails, and phone calls have poured in from across the country. Many, I'm pleased to tell you, were supportive, but many also had the flavor of those that I read earlier. Then, on August the 19th, after the Family Policy Network's legal efforts to shut us down failed, we went on with our discussion groups. We trusted our students' desire to read, to think, and to learn. And nothing terrible happened. If the intent of the program had been to convert students to Islam, it was a tragic failure. There were no known conversions. Carolina's religion remains basketball. Did we know that when we selected approaching the Quran that it would be controversial? Yes. Did we know that it would literally fuel a new round of national debate about academic freedom? Not in our wildest imaginations, but I'm glad it did. It is precisely in times like these in our history that it is important to reaffirm a university's role in addressing controversial subjects. One of the many newspaper headlines said it best. The university's summer reading program is about ideas, not indoctrination. The role of the university is to educate, not to advocate. But an idea, especially an idea about religion, or an even more combustible mixture of religion and politics, is dangerous only when we don't have the critical thinking to examine it. We have a responsibility to students to provide an atmosphere in which they can deepen their sense of themselves and the complex, often contradictory world around them. That's what the summer reading program is designed to do. We want to create an intellectual climate in which students themselves can come to their own conclusions and turn information into insight. So what happened in those discussion sessions?
Well, I can tell you about the discussion group that I led. For 2 hours, 25 first-year students spoke respectfully and articulately about a wide range of perspectives, value systems, and beliefs. Students from Christian backgrounds compared notes with a Jewish student about a passage from Approaching the Quran. That discussion was prompted in part by a comparison of a passage from the Quran, one of the surahs, with a psalm from the Bible. We agreed on the similarity of themes in both texts, such as, one, omniscient God, the ephemeral nature of life, and the concept of redemption. The students also found interesting differences. And one student recounted criticisms of the summer reading assignment by her friends and family. And she said she participated anyway because she wanted to be educated. For many of our students, the biggest question of the day seemed to be, what was the fuss all about? I felt enormous pride in our students for their diligence in preparation for a non-credit reading assignment and discussion, and for their unflappability in the face of national attention. I thought to myself, these kids will be just fine. This is a new generation of leaders. They are an enormous asset to North Carolina and to the other states they call home. The University of North Carolina has long been credited with taking the sons and daughters of mill hands and farmers and turning them into leaders. This is our proud legacy. Farrell Guillory, who heads UNC's program in Southern politics, media, and public life, in a piece in last Sunday's Raleigh News and Observer, points to John Edgerton's book, Speak Now Against the Day, which is an account of the South in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. Edgerton says in this book, and I quote, "The single most glowing exception to broad-based mediocrity in the Southern academic world was the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. The university acquired a level of independence and quality that kept it in the front rank of public and private schools in the region." End quote. It would be easy to misread the recent events in North Carolina and conclude that this was just another example of some backward Southern state demonstrating its lack of tolerance for dissent or for progressive and unpopular ideas. Such a conclusion would badly miss the mark. To be sure, North Carolina, as Guillory points out in his News and Observer piece, has long been a state of internal conflicts and contradictions, a state that could simultaneously elect Jim Hunt and Jesse Helms. It is at the same time a conservative state and a modern progressive state. Some of America's leading financial institutions are based in North Carolina, and our medical centers are among the nation's best. Joining UNC Chapel Hill is a great array of distinguished institutions of higher education in North Carolina. Duke, North Carolina State University, both in the triangle with us, Wake Forest, Davidson, and several other universities in the UNC system. Today at Chapel Hill, we still have students from every small town in the state, but we also have students from very sophisticated big city schools in North Carolina, from the District of Columbia and the 49 other states and 100 countries. But wherever they hail from, our students all come to Chapel Hill to learn about themselves and the world in an atmosphere of open, free, and rigorous inquiry. That atmosphere has served our students and the state of North Carolina exceedingly well. The leading public university fearlessly tackles subjects that make all of us a little uncomfortable. That's the only way we find the answers to the really big issues facing our state, our nation, and the world. To create an environment of unfettered inquiry in which students learn to think critically, ask tough questions, and come to their own conclusions. That's what we want. We want our students to taste the excitement of encountering new ideas. This year in the summer reading program, we succeeded beyond our wildest dreams. And along the way, other important issues, including academic freedom, became a significant part of the story. And our students got to think about it and talk about it. In short, we believed in our students, and they showed us that they have tremendous intellectual capacity. We put our trust completely in their desire to read, to think, and to learn. Suppressing that trust in any way would diminish the educational experience of all students, and it would diminish our nation's ability to respond to the many challenges that it will face in the future. Ensuring that trust and providing an environment in which difficult, relevant subjects may be discussed freely is the university's very reason for existence. In spite of the success of the program, I'm acutely aware that many people did not support the book selected for our summer reading assignment, or what we were indeed trying to accomplish with the discussions. And reasonable people can disagree about the choice of the book, and they do, both on campus and off campus. But we did not and would not ever take a public opinion poll before assigning a book. If we felt that a particular book is important to the discussion of a particular topic. The criticism leveled against the Sells book is that it presents an incomplete picture of Islam, that it presents only the early surahs, not the later ones, which are often used as a pretext for violence and terrorism. There is some merit to this charge. Remember, the purpose of this program was not to present the complete picture of the faith of Islam in a single reading and a 2-hour discussion. That would be impossible. Indeed, the reading itself and the discussions that have ensued have raised many questions about Islam and Islamic fundamentalism. Where is the moderate Islamic voice? Is it being suppressed by the tide of Wahhabism that is dominant in many of the countries of the Middle East? These are good questions, and it is my hope that many of our students will be intrigued enough to pursue them with further study. That, after all, is the real purpose of the summer reading program, to whet the appetite for learning and discovery. The level of national controversy and media attention to this event could easily lead us to the false conclusion that we accomplished more than we did. This was only one book and one 2-hour discussion, not for credit. In leading our students to a better understanding of the world, I think we may have moved 1 grain of sand. 1 grain of sand. But it was a start. Now we hear that the Family Policy Network is at it again. Last week, the group attacked a reading assignment for new students at the University of Maryland, charging that in assigning the Laramie Project for Maryland students, the university is advocating a homosexual agenda. I wrote a note of support to President Dan Mote to extend my sympathy and best wishes. At least the FPN has good taste in universities. Throughout this controversy, a few of our critics have lumped UNC Chapel Hill with the likes of Harvard and Berkeley. That is the kind of guilt by association that I can embrace. Thank you for the opportunity to tell our story here today. I'll be happy now to answer questions.
Thank you, Chancellor. We're open for questions. Please give your name and affiliation. Askia.
My name is Askia Muhammad. I'm with the Final Call newspaper and National Scene News Bureau. I would preface by saying one of your co-religionists in basketball, Duke University, was the home of one of the most esteemed scholars on Islam in the United States, Dr. C. Eric Lincoln. But my question to you, and I suppose there's no, rivalry necessarily between your campus and Duke over this issue per se, but my question is, what other controversial books have you discussed in your summer reading program, and what kind of responses have you gotten from the public aside from just this one topic?
This is the fourth year, as I said, of the summer reading program. The first year was a book about young people growing up in the projects of Chicago. The second book was a book called Confederates in the Attic, and that was a controversial book. It dealt with the neo-Confederate movement in the South, and it had some interesting interplay, especially for African-American students coming to a university in the South. And there was some controversy attached to that book as well because of some charges made against the author by some descendants of war veterans of the Confederacy. But that one was was provocative. The third book was The Spirit Catches You and You All Fall Down by Ann Fadiman, which was a study of a particular, in general, of the Hmong or Montagnards who came to this country after the Vietnam War. And their difficulty in being assimilated, and their actually lack of desire to be assimilated into American culture, focusing on the medical problems of a young Hmong girl who suffered from epilepsy, and the lack of communication between Western or American medicine and the medical establishment and this culture, which is very strange to us. So this was also a book about culture and the intermix of cultures. So we have an interesting history of books. I think we will be challenged to find a fifth book that will create as much interest as the book this year.
This woman in the blue shirt over there.
Dr. Moeser, the point of family
Your
policy...
name and affiliation, please.
Yes, Dr. Robert Dyke, Voice of America Radio. Very briefly, Dr. Moeser, the point of family policy that we're just trying to make is that by signing the book, Understanding the Quran, the University of North Carolina is A, proselytizing, in fact, teaching Islam to students, and B, in sort of setting a precedent for a double standard as regards the handling, rather, dealing with Christianity and dealing with Islamic universities. It seems to me really that's what these people are getting at. That's at the heart of the issue. How do you respond to that charge?
The courts have been very clear, in fact, the Freedom Forum as well, very clearly established principles for the teaching of religion in public schools and universities. It's well established in legal precedent that religion is a part of the canon of the study of the humanities, and it's an absolutely appropriate thing for us to study. What's not appropriate is for us to advocate a point of view, and we have not and would never do that.
This lady right here.
Jennifer Connie with the Dartmouth Herald Sun. I was just wondering, in the discussions in general, and yours in particular, did a connection between Islam and the attacks of September 11th come up, and if so, how was it?
There was definitely some discussion of September the 11th in my discussion group. I think our students were puzzled how you could get from certainly these texts to any acts of violence, because the texts that we were reading are pacific in nature. It's beautiful lyric poetry that's very much like the Old Testament Psalms or the Proverbs. And that's, of course, one of the criticisms of the book, that the book did not include any of the texts that deal with the later political developments of the Islamic State that are more as political as much as theological.
This woman is standing in the wall.
Sir, a few minutes ago you said Wahhabism is dominant in many countries in the Middle East. Do you have statistics to support that? Because my information is that, with the exception of Saudi Arabia and Yemen, Wahhabism is non-existent in terms of numbers and influence.
I can't counter your. You may be absolutely correct, and if you are, I would yield to you on that one.
Heidi Belmar, Fox News Channel. trying to better understand specifically why the choice of this book, why not another religious text?
I think the choice of the book, and I should clarify, the choice of the book was made by a committee of faculty, staff, and students, and ultimately came upon the recommendation of our senior scholar in Islamic Studies in the Department of Religious Studies. The committee struggled to find a book that would shed some light in the post 9/11 environment, and they began to look at books that would shed light, especially on Islam, for the context that would help set for students, and that was the whole rationale of the committee, I think, as they grappled to find the right book.
This is one right here. Next.
My name is Saeed Shai, also represent the Voice of America's Postal Service. So I have one question and two suggestions. Besides the edition which you chose for the students, if you would have added to other edition, the glorious Holy Quran and the esteemed Quran by Muhammad al-Paktal, who was a British gentleman and converted to Islam in mid-30s, and also Muhammad Asad, who was a Jewish scholar and journalist in World War II, and then they have written nice commentaries and have given balanced view of both. Your decision has also inspired discussions in the Muslim world, especially in Afghanistan, and I think it has been well received by people. The first time that academic freedom has seen its real face, in spite of the criticism from this group or that group. My question is, in face of the tremendous criticism you faced and the threats and challenges, do you wish to further continue this program, or it will be just the only thing that happened and you will stop it for further readings?
Oh, I think are you asking about the freshman reading program, or?
The academic board decides in future to continue with such similar studies in future.
I'm sure that we will continue to choose. Let me say, I think you're asking two different questions. I think we'll continue with the summer reading program and choose provocative books that will help our students develop creative reasoning and thinking skills. And secondly, I believe that there will be continued, I think there's heightened interest in this subject matter, which we'll see in additional lectures. And we see this all over America. There is a heightened interest in Islamic studies and the study of these, especially this religion, but world religions, I think, as a result. So this is happening in universities all over this country.
Thank you, sir. This gentleman, do you have a question in the blue shirt?
Yeah. I have a couple of points. The first one is, to what extent do you think that the future reputation of your university has become dependent now on the outcome of this controversy? And the second point is, what is, in your opinion, the factor that you think will eventually decide which course this whole debate will take, whether in your favor or against you?
Well, I think, let me say first of all, the vision of Chapel Hill is to be the leading public university in America. We've set that vision for ourselves, and that is, and we're quite committed to it. I believe that this university has stood tall in this, and in fact, I think we have demonstrated in this matter leading. Earlier in the year, for example, we were the first American public university, certainly of our size, to eliminate early decisions admissions. That was another example of, in our view, doing something because it was the right thing to do. It was a sort of morally based decision, not in our fate, not in our interest, but in the interest of students coming to the university. So I'd like to think that Chapel Hill is taking a place among American universities at the leading edge, not advocating a point of view, but bringing critical issues to the public square for discussion, not only on this campus, but in this country and indeed in the world. And I'm pleased to hear that there is a ripple effect, not only in this country, but even in the Middle East, that these issues are being discussed. If we've had a small role in moving that discussion forward, then I think this university's played a valuable role.
Yes, sir.
My name is Matt Young from Religion News Service. I was just wondering if you think that our religious Southerners were particularly angry that a Southern university was espousing a reading that would not be in support of their own faith.
I'd be reluctant to put any kind of regional cast on that. I'm a Southerner myself, and I'm not willing to accept the premise, I think the implied premise, that somehow Southerners are
are less likely to, or less progressive than the rest of the country. So I don't think I would agree with that.
Yes, sir. Yes, Don, you were first.
Greg Topper from the AP. Was it a good book?
It is a good book. It's a good book. I read the book carefully. It's not an easy book, but what really impressed me was our students got the book. I mean, all 25 students in my discussion group had read the book. They were able to, I learned from my students, and they learned from each other. So it was a very provocative book in terms of the discussions. They each wrote papers. Most of them wrote paraphrases of one of the surahs in their own words. I was very impressed at how they were able to get meaning out of difficult texts. So yes, it's a good book. It's a good introduction to Islam for one who stands outside the faith and wants to begin to understand the core scriptures that stand at the very beginning of that tradition.
This gentleman right here, and then this one.
Hi, I'm John Wagner with the Raleigh News and Observer. And as I'm sure you know, in our paper recently, Gene Arnold, a state legislator, wrote that this is not the first time that you had put Carolina in a bad light or taken issue with the General Assembly, and that your continuing arrogant attitude toward the General Assembly is creating a deep and lasting resentment. And my question is, regardless of the merits of your position on this particular issue, do you fear that there are any potential repercussions down the road in dealing with lawmakers for whom you rely on your budget?
I have great confidence in the wisdom and judgment, not only the people of North Carolina, but in their elected representatives, and who have over time been incredibly generous to this university. We're a great university today because of the people of North Carolina who have supported this university and higher education to a degree not found in any other state. You can't go in any other state and not find some examples of tension and disagreement, and that is actually the yeast of if you will, of moving forward. But I have every confidence that the people of this state have always and will continue to love and cherish this university. And this university, I want to say, is committed to serving the state and the people. When we talk about being a great university, that really starts at home in terms of being a university that affects all 100 counties of the state. Our relationship with those small towns as well as the cities is a very real one, and it's very important to us that we have that relationship with the people. So no, I don't have any long-term worries about that.
This gentleman right here.
From World Net Television, would you have faced the same fuss about this summer program if September 11 never happened?
That's a very good question. I don't know the answer to that question. Clearly, September 11th has created a tremendous amount of uncertainty, anxiety, fear, and even hostility in this country. And I suspect that it has changed the chemistry. There's no question that it's changed the chemistry.
I know you're a state employee and you're bound to uphold the law. I wonder if there were discussions when you're waiting for the court decision as to whether the groups would go on even if the court had not ruled in your favor.
There were. There were such discussions, and I can tell you that in my conversations with faculty, without any sanction or any direction from administrative leadership, the faculty and the students of Chapel Hill would have continued. Those discussions would have taken place.
Al Milliken, Washington Independent Writers. Do you personally believe the early revelations or only later revelations identify Jews and Christians as infidels, justify slavery such as in Sudan today, impose Sharia law on non-Muslims, and spread Islam by the sword? Isn't partial truth more deceptive propaganda than really an exercise in academic instruction?
Is there a question there?
Yes. It sounds to me some of your students and yourself may be in a brainwashed state yourself. You're not presenting the whole truth, are you? I mean, you've admitted that you're only presenting the early revelations.
We never said anything but that. We were very clear about that from the very beginning. We never pretended to present the whole picture, the whole. I mean, if we were presenting a picture of an introduction to the New Testament, where would you begin? If you were beginning an introduction to the Old Testament, where would you begin? You have to begin at the beginning, and that's where we began.
Heidi Gilmore, Fox News Channel. Just a follow-up question. One of the editorials covering the story suggested that this assignment violated constitutional provisions against state-sponsored religion. Do you disagree with that statement?
Obviously, we do. Because the Constitution is very clear about the establishment of religion and advocacy of religion in a tax-supported or state-supported environment. The courts, as I said, have been very, very clear about the propriety of teaching religion in public schools, which including public universities. We've been offering courses in one of the largest departments of religious studies in Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, every major known religion is taught, but from the standpoint of an objective detachment about not to advocate that religion. It's a very important part of the overall fabric of a university that deals with culture and history.
Yes, sir.
Nihad Awad with the Council on American Islamic Relations in Washington. First, I would like to say thank you for bringing knowledge to students, and we commend your efforts to help them understand one of the most important topics today, especially after September 11th, because Islam and Islamic religion are a point of interest to many people here and abroad. Would you recommend, after discussing the reading with the 25 students, do you recommend this book to public officials and members of Congress based on the findings that they found in the book?
Well, as I said, the book was helpful to me. Is it the best or only book on this subject? I would not pretend to say that because I'm not a scholar in this field. But it was certainly a helpful book. It was in the view of our senior professor of Islamic Studies, Dr. Carl Ernst, who's used this book twice as a textbook in undergraduate courses. The best book to introduce persons who are unfamiliar with this faith and tradition. The best point of introduction. And I found it, from my own perspective, yes, extremely useful and helpful.
Can you talk a little bit about sort of what's next in this front for either for you or for the university? Is this given rise to any kind of campus-wide effort on these issues, or is your faculty got anything in mind?
I'm tempted to give you a flip answer and say what's next for us is a football game on Saturday. But I think seriously, and in fact my hope is that there will be a deeper thirst for knowledge and understanding for our own students and for Americans in general in this whole field. Now I must tell you, at the end of my discussion group, as the New York Times I think reported, I asked my students, how many of you now are going to, I didn't say it quite in these words, are going to rush out of here and enroll in a comparative religion course, and not a single hand went up. And I remember these are 18-year-old first-year students who had yet to take their first course. They have not even taken their first English course. So this was pre-college, literally, the day before college begins for these 25-year-old students, 25 students who are mostly 18 and 19 years old. Michael Sells is coming to Chapel Hill on September 5th for a lecture. We're looking at other lecturers from other points of view to come over the course of the year, because I think this is an important topic. And as I've told you, from what in talking to my colleagues around the country, there's been a rush in this country for enrollments. The sales of the Koran are going up. People want to understand what's going on here. What's the nature of this religion? And these people? Who are these people? How can we understand them better? And so I think this is all a very healthy thing, and I'd like to think that this university played a constructive role in moving, as I said, one grain of sand in understanding.
Yes.
If I understand you correctly, in selecting this book, you were deliberately trying to find a book which would be controversial.
No, I don't think we were deliberately trying to be controversial. In fact, that was not our intent. Provocative in the best sense of the word, but not controversial.
Yes, I wonder if you would talk a little bit about the decision to let students write a paper about why they chose not to read the book. Did you make a decision specifically because you want to? Have you done that in the past? How many students do that?
I think there's a misunderstanding I infer from your question itself. Let me make it absolutely clear. all students were asked to write a paper, whether they read the book or not. And in fact, once we started, not from the lawsuit, but from the objections that started coming in via email, we asked ourselves the question, should we be sensitive to this issue? What about a student who on conscience says, I shouldn't have to read this book? We said a reasonable point for us to adjust, the one adjustment we made, as a matter of fact, was to say, okay, if on conscience you don't want to read this book, we still want you to come to the discussion group, we still want you to write a paper and participate in a discussion. Remember, this is a non-credit experience, and we don't take any attendance at these discussion groups, so in fact, we don't really know who comes or who doesn't come. But it was an attempt to accommodate the person who says, out of conscience, you can't make me read this book. And it was that accommodation we made. We did not, however, single out those students and say, as the FPN alleged, that somehow they were going to be singled out to defend their faith because we made them write a paper. Everybody wrote a paper.
I'm curious to know, in your long career as a higher education administrator, how surprised were you by this reaction, first of all? And second of all, what have you personally learned about sort of the state of affairs in the country on the basis of this experience?
Well, as I said, we were quite, we knew that there would be some degree of at least conversation about this, but I never imagined any controversy of this scale. To speak to the issue where we intentionally, creating a controversy, far from it. And I think it does raise some really interesting and serious questions about what's going on in our country. That I think we as Americans really should spend some time in self-reflection thinking about. What is behind our fear? Why would anyone be afraid of opening a book that would help us in understanding another culture or another point of view? And I would hope one of the positive aspects that may come out of this is that we as a nation might avoid the kind of reactions that we felt and the actions that we took against Japanese Americans in 1941, for example, or in the communist witch hunts of the McCarthyist period. When we look back and we say, as a country, why did we do those things? Why didn't we think through that? Perhaps if we ask the right questions today, perhaps in the 21st century, we can avoid some of the mistakes that we made in those periods, recognizing that as a country, we obviously face a very dangerous and unknown entity that frightens us, that threatens our very sense of security, and that anxiety itself, I think, is what feeds this fear.
Any more questions? Yeah,
Maybe you've been asked this before. Were there any students who withdrew as a result of having to complete this assignment?
Were there students who withdrew from the university?
Yeah.
I don't know of any students who withdrew from the university, although one newspaper article that I read, I think in Time Magazine, alleged that 3 students did. But I'm not aware of any students who withdrew. There were a few students on campus. I've spoken with a very few students who objected to the proposal. But as I say, controversy is this kind of controversy is part of the fabric and the weave of Chapel Hill. My sense is that our students found it, certainly all 25 of the students in my discussion group, all 25 read the book. They didn't all like the book. Some of them thought it was a boring book. But they all did their paper. They all participated in the discussion, and I think they came away with some sense of knowing something that they didn't know before the process started.
There was a question before about the legislature. Just to follow up on that, how do you think this will affect fundraising?
You mean fundraising or sales?
I'm sorry?
You mean
actual fundraising from alumni and
That's hard to measure, but my sense is the alumni of Chapel Hill all over this country are incredibly proud that their university. A lot of our alumni remember the speaker ban of the 60s when the legislature passed a law that forbade any communist or any person that had ever taken the Fifth Amendment on the question, have you ever been a member of the Communist Party, from speaking on campus. And that was actually one of the great proud moments that our alumni point to when students rallied to support free speech at Carolina. This is a university that has a great history of free speech, and I think our alumni resonate with our being true to the historic character of the place.
Now everything is over. At the moment, you in the academic board, do you feel personally vindicated by your decision that you made the right decision?
We do. We do. The discussions themselves, in my view, vindicated the process because they were right on the mark. They were civil. They were dispassionate. They were insightful. Absolutely. And I think we did the right thing here.
Yes, sir.
Sujono from Indonesia. I just wondering whether you expect other university will follow up your initiative?
Whether other universities will follow. Certainly, we know, as I said, across America, there's increasing interest in study in this area. Islamicists are now very highly sought after on all faculties. We just recruited a new one at Chapel Hill this year. Whether another university will get into, I'm sure they would think twice about engaging in this kind of controversy. But I think we have done something important here, and if we had led, I suspect in other ways other universities will follow. But I would doubt that they would do it, exactly the same way that we did.
Yes, sir.
Al Miller, WIW again. Have you booked any of the alternative points of view yet to speak? Who are they, and would Franklin Graham be welcome?
I tell you this, any point of view is welcome on our campus. I don't book speakers. I have a lot of responsibilities, but absolutely. I mean, the one thing that we stand for is all points of view are welcome.
Any more questions? Yes, sir.
You mentioned Berkeley before in your speech. If say, Berkeley or Yale had assigned the Quran as reading, do you think that there would have been such controversy over the reading?
I just can't. I mean, that's a hypothetical question. I can't answer. I wouldn't have imagined it for us.
Yes, sir.
Brad Wright from CNN. Could you give us a little sampling of, anonymous if you prefer, of the correspondence you received from other college presidents about this particular subject?
It's the correspondence I've received from my colleagues around the country has been incredibly supportive. From as close by as President Kohan at Duke University to colleagues all over the country. And I will be speaking to my colleagues at the American Association of Universities at Emory in October. I'll be speaking to the National Association of State Universities and land-grant colleges at a meeting in Chicago. But it has been universally, I'm 100% supportive. And I suspect also glad that I was dealing with this and they weren't.
Is there any one line or anything you particularly remember about those correspondence that stood out?
Well, I think the one was an email I received last week which said, "Thank you for," it's something to the effect, "Thank you for representing to this country the real purposes of an American public university, the character and integrity of a university and what it should stand for." That's been sort of this resonance about the willingness to tackle tough issues, but also the defense of academic freedom. My sense is that even if this were the wrong book, even if I totally disagreed with the faculty at Carolina about this book, I should have defended their right to choose this book as a matter of academic freedom.
That was a little different than those emails you read first.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Nina Camwood from ABC News. I'm just curious to know what you thought the public reaction would be. Did you expect that so many people would say so much about this issue?
No, and I think, again, it points to the post-9/11 mood in this country. I think this would not have been an issue a year ago today.
If there are no further questions, let me remind you, please, to add your name to the sign-in list. That's right, if you haven't yet. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chancellor Moeser.
Join us later tonight for a special presentation of your favorite